Last night, the Royal Winnipeg Ballet started the run of one of the world's most beloved and most well-known ballets, the ballet Giselle. Choreographed to the magnificent musical score written by Adolph Adam, Giselle has enchanted audiences since it was first performed in Paris back in 1841. Giselle has everything an audience could desire in a ballet, a tale of love and redemption, one of the most stunning and unforgettable pas de deux in the entire ballet repertoire, and a heart-wrenching story where the protagonist, broken by love, dies only to forgive her beloved in death. In the second act, ethereal, ghostly spirits move with haunting grace and flawless synchronicity, elevating the emotional intensity. Giselle is, without doubt, a timeless masterpiece of the ballet canon. The Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra is accompanying the RWB, and here to guest the WSO is Geneviève Leclair, an associate professor at the Berklee College of Music. Leclair has made a name for herself as one of the preeminent ballet conductors. She has worked with the National Ballet of Canada, Boston Ballet, and the Northern Ballet. Aside from her ballet engagements, she has also conducted the Orchestre Metropolitan in Montreal, the Sherbrooke Symphony Orchestra, the Saskatoon Symphony, and in 2017, she was awarded the American Prize for Orchestral Conducting. And joining me here in the Classic 107 studio to talk about all things conducting and all things Giselle, I am joined by Geneviève Leclair. Hey, Geneviève, nice to meet you here in studio.
Hi, nice to meet you. Thank you for having me.
I first want to start out the conversation by asking about you. You have a master's in flute performance from the University of Montreal, but when I was reading about you, conducting was always sort of the primary focus. Can you talk about the reason why you studied flute at such a high level before turning to conducting?
Yes, well, I was about 15 when I decided I wanted to be a conductor. And so I went into higher education and music for that reason specifically. And as I was studying, I had a teacher during my bachelor's degree who is a very well-respected conductor in Quebec and also a performer in Orchestre Metropolitan. And I asked him what his advice was for, pursuing conducting. And he gave me what I think was one of the best pieces of advice I ever got, which is finish your instrument. Be sure that you can play at that level, that you have that level of musicianship before you stand in front of an orchestra, and really know what you're asking, what the orchestra can do. And so I did. I finished my master's before I turned to conducting sort of officially.
And you got your doctorate in conducting from Boston University, is that right?
Yes,
right?
That's true.
How did you get into conducting for the ballet? How did that come about?
Well, I used to dance. I took ballet from the age of 2 to the age of 19. So ballet had always been a part of my background. And when I started out my career, I started as an assistant conductor with the National Academy Orchestra of Canada in Hamilton, Ontario.
Boris Brott?
Boris Brott, correct. And Boris had conducted the Covent Garden Ballet early in his career. And the conversation kind of just, happened one night. And I said, how did you get into this? Because no university, well, no, I'm not going to say no university, but very few higher education programs for conducting teach ballet conducting. That would require having a ballet school in the building, which oftentimes is not the case. So we focus on symphony, we focus on opera. And so I said, how did you get into it? And so the conversation got going, and I realized that really if you wanted to conduct ballet, the sort of really one of the only ways accessible to get into it is to apprentice with somebody who knows how to do this, right? Who's been doing it. And so I approached the Boston Ballet. I was, as you mentioned, studying in Boston at the time. And so I approached the Boston Ballet, and it started from there. They didn't really need an assistant, but they let me shadow, and then I organized a class with BU, and it all stemmed from there, really.
That's wonderful. One of the things I admire about opera and ballet conductors is that you've got to keep one eye on the score, obviously, but you also have to keep one eye on stage. There's phrasing for the musicians, but there's also phrasing, especially for ballet, for the dancers. Phrases might get stretched out because of the movement. How do you negotiate that in the pit?
You have to know the score inside out for one thing, right? And then it's just multiple levels of attention going at the same time. As you said, you have one eye up there, you have one eye down here, and I find that, bottom line, you have to know both mediums really well. You have to understand how dance works. You have to understand how to really do it well. You have to understand how music works, and I find that the two really meet in the breath. Right? If you can really match the breathing, the way the dance breathes, the way the phrase breathes for the dance, and the way the phrase breathes with the music, this is where you really, you got a winning situation.
Absolutely. And thankfully, you've got the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra in the pit. When did rehearsals start for you for Giselle, and how has it been working? How has it been working with the WSO?
It's fantastic. I mean, they're just a wonderful ensemble. So it's been a great week. We had rehearsals on Tuesday and Wednesday morning with the orchestra, and then dress rehearsal with the dancers on Wednesday night, and we were on yesterday.
Yeah, fantastic. The score Adolph Adam wrote for Giselle is so great. There's so many memorable tunes. There's a moment where Giselle makes her first appearance on stage. There's that wonderful pas de deux that happens in Act 1. There's Murtha's solo in the second act, and the dances of the Willis in the second act. It's such a wonderful ballet. How many times have you conducted Giselle, and what do you love about conducting the score?
Actually, yesterday was my first performance of Giselle. I've been conducting ballet for 15 years, and that's the one of the big staples that just hadn't come by. And so I was very excited to do my first performance of it yesterday. It's as you mentioned, it's a fantastic score. There's beautiful moments, and it's also the first act is pretty much entirely pantomime, and the second act is very much dance focused, as you were mentioning, with all those solos, and so from a conducting standpoint, it's you get a lot of storytelling in the first act, a lot of making the music match what's going on in the action on stage, and then in the second act, it's very much hitting the right tempi so that the dance is at its best. Yeah.
And one of the things, I was going to get to it, one of the things about Giselle that I find so striking is there is so much contrast between Act 1 and Act 2. I mean, you've got Giselle and Albrecht on stage falling in love and that whole thing, and there's lots of solos. There's not a lot of ensemble dancing, a lot of people just standing around in the background sort of watching things take place. And then the second act, you have all this beautiful, the dances of the Willis and, this large scale ensemble. Do you have to change gears moving from Act 1 to Act 2 as a conductor, like mentally?
I mean, mentally, not so much, but I really find it's in what you're bringing out in the rehearsal that it happens. It's all that worked in the first act of getting the music to match really the action, because from one version to the other, you're always going to have differences, right? And how it's portrayed on stage. So making the music really match the action and it's like spices you're adding to your food, right? Making it really even more obvious what's going on in the head of the characters on stage. Whereas the second act is very much all about the dancing, the variations, the beautiful solos, the pas de deux, all of that. And the perfection that is that Act 2. Do you have any favorite moments in the ballet? Oh, I mean, all of it. It's from beginning to end. It's just such a... It's such a wonderful ballet. There's no, sometimes you think, this part is a little long. There's none of that in Giselle. It's just exactly the right length for you to understand the story. It doesn't drag on anywhere. So it goes from one favorite moment to the other, really. And there's a reason why it's a masterpiece. For those who've never seen ballet before, can you talk about the advantage to seeing live ballet as opposed to just sitting at home and listening to the music on Spotify or with a CD player? I think it's the same thing. I mean, I think that the answer to that question is the same one as when we talk about live symphony orchestra or, live arts in general. You sit in the hall, you get the atmosphere. I don't know. It's like the fingers tingle, and then you get to see, and every performance is different. right? In a recorded performance, you can watch it 20 times, it's going to be the same, but every performance is different. We have different casts, they have different energy. Something's going to happen in the evening, it's going to be unique. That's not going to happen tomorrow. And on top of it, you have the live orchestra. There's nothing, no matter how loud you crank those speakers at home, there's nothing that gives you the vibrations and that you experience in the hall with the real instruments.
Yeah, one of the things when I say to friends, the Rite of Spring, it's great music. It's way better as a ballet. It's the same thing with Giselle, absolutely. Yeah, because you see the story.
You put the two, it's
stage.
two magical art forms, and then you put it together and you get twice the fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Giselle, this has been so great Geneviève, this has been so great having you here. I'm going to wrap up the conversation by asking what's next for you. What do you have on docket after Giselle?
I am heading somewhere on Tuesday right after I'm done here, and I can't tell you where yet because it hasn't been announced officially by the company, and I have to wait until they do announce it to be able to. But there's some fun happening between now and the end of the 2024, and then I'll be in Montreal at the end of February, beginning of March for a production with Université de Montréal, an opera production of Hansel and Gretel, and then I'll be with the Regina Symphony mid-March for a pops concert. So coming back to the prairies.
I'm busy.
Yes.
Yeah. Geneviève, this has been wonderful having you here. All the best on the run. And thanks so much for taking the time out of your remarkably busy schedule here to stop by our Classic 107 studio and talk to me today. It's been wonderful.
Thank you so much for having me.